Well, I congratulate Katie Clark on her motion, which I was pleased to sign, and I am delighted she brought this motion to the Chamber. And I nearly agree with everything that my old sparring partner Richard Leonard had to say in his, as usual, energetic and convincing speech. The reality is that the governments are responsible for the difficult business of setting spending priorities. That's a reality. And before we hear rebuttals from the front bench about, if you're going to take money from, spend more money here, you've got to take it from here, that same old tired argument we get from nationalist and green ministers continually. The reality is that the public expect the government to set true priorities. They expect the government to do the right thing by them. And despite the wilder claims of members in this chamber, there will always be greater demands on public spending than governments have the resources to satisfy. Because there is no bottomless pit of money, and to suggest otherwise is to be fundamentally dishonest with the public. But I say again, the public rightly expect governments here and at Westminster to do what is right based on the information available to ministers. Now, government is about making difficult challenges, taking on difficult challenges, and to stop pretending they don't exist. And we don't negate the fact that the government has to make difficult decisions, but the way that the SNP and Green ministers bleat on about how difficult it all is, I wonder whether they haven't grown tired of being in the business of government and making those tough decisions. They certainly come across as a government that has run out of steam completely. See, fundamentally, Presiding Officer, I believe that the first duty of government is public safety. And sensible spending priorities begin with the basic obligation of public safety, properly funding and investing in essential public services, and that means the blue light services. The first responders, the people who are there to protect life, to save life, and put their own lives on the line to serve us all. So why does this government refuse to prioritise these services? We have senior officers in the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service telling us that the service is catastrophically underfunded. Yet all we have heard, last week, for example, in First Minister's questions, the First Minister claiming that he and his ministerial colleagues know more about what is happening inside the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service than the people who work in that service. This is the same ignorant dismissal that is given in response to the voices of concern raised in the other essential services that the public expect us to properly fund, most notably Police Scotland and the Scottish justice system, all of which are in crisis.
Stuart McMillan.
Thanks, Stephen Kerr, for taking the intervention. And surprisingly, I actually agree with Mr Kerr on his point regarding putting more money into the emergency services. It's probably the first time that him and I have agreed on something in the time of Parliament. However, there's also the point, going back to his earlier comments about governments have got to take difficult decisions and spending priorities. What budget would he take money from to put more money into that particular area?
Stephen Kerr.
Well, I think I have agreed with Stuart McMillan on other issues. He's being somewhat ungenerous in what he says. But I will have to say to him, he's brought out the same old tired line about how difficult it is to be in government. If you can't stand the heat of the kitchen, you get out of the kitchen. If you can't be in government to make governmental decisions and to set priorities, get out of ministerial office, because that is why you get paid the big money to make these decisions. And there have been, frankly, too many examples of ministers in this government in recent weeks of lightly dismissing the concerns that people are raising about the state of our public services. Now, I think, in fairness, I have run out of time. But look at the example of what the SNP has done to the Fire and Rescue Service. Just a snapshot of that report that's been quoted quite a few times, and the reflections of colleagues. And by the way, well done, Katie Clark, on uniting all of us, I think, in all the parties, in demanding that the government sit up and pay attention and do something more to fund our essential public services. Fire stations closing, tenders being withdrawn, staff not being trained adequately, response times stretching dangerously, morale in decline. None of this is sustainable. So it's time for this SNP government to prioritise the national interest and not their nationalist interest.
Thank you.